you had from the start. Believe me, it's worth trying again. When we fall, we don't just stay on the ground. We don't run away when the trials abound. Let Yahweh pick you up and you'll be stronger. Let His laws lift you up and you'll be stronger. All those days when you feel like crying, you get back up and you keep on striving. Let His house lead you. You keep going, you don't give up. Every trial makes us stronger, so let's hold on a little longer. We won't cave under the stress. We'll keep doing our best. We are strong, we are going to hold on. Well, today you're not okay, but you're gonna make it anyway. When we fall, we don't just stay on the ground. We don't. Let Yahweh pick you up and you'll be stronger. Let His laws lift you up and you'll be stronger. When we fall, we don't just stay on the ground. And we don't run away when the trials abound. Let Yahweh pick you up and you'll be stronger. Let His laws lift you up and you'll be stronger. He'll pick you up and you'll be
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'm the daughter of Yisrayl, Hawkins, and I'd like to serve you as the priestess starting very soon. Please start finding your seats for Sabbath services. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I am a daughter of Yisrayl Hawkins, and I would like to serve you as a priestess starting very soon. Please get your pens and paper ready to take notes. Please welcome the great priest of Yahweh.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Please be seated for a few announcements. Please check the bulletin boards for the latest updates on clean and unclean products. This Sabbath, at the Lamplight Cafeteria, enjoy your takeout dinner today. For dinner, we'll be serving oki marinated deer, rice, and beans. Also, for desserts, we have cake, cookies, ice cream, and oki shodom. The concession stands will not be open this afternoon, and the cafeteria will close today at 5:30 p.m. Abel's Kitchen will be serving doubles, only one per person, until all are served. Starting 30 minutes after services. Pizza slices only will be available after all of the doubles have been served. And that's all the announcements. If you please stand, we'll go ahead and have opening prayer shortly.
Please raise your hands for opening prayer. Heavenly Father, this is your servant Deacon Yash, come through the icons passion with sound loud Shum. Please allow us to get the services that we will be able to take in all knowledge and wisdom that we can. And please bless the lips of the speakers that will be speaking today, that they will speak everything that you want them to. And please bless kind of Himley's prison, or suffering in the prisons, so they may be able to come here and listen to your word every single day. Please allow us to confess of all our sins and shortcomings. Please allow the peace of may go into the world safely. Please allow us to be obedient to our authorities at all times. And access things to the Baikon's passion with sound like Shum Sai. Hi, I praise Yah.
Father Yahweh, this is Quan Shmuel Hawkins, along with your sons and daughters, Father, seeking permission to come before you in unity with the righteous body of the priest, the house of Yahweh, a seed of the last days, witness the great Quan Yisrayl Abel Hawkins, through our most hobbed and honorable high priest and King Yeshua Messiah. Father, we thank you for this opportunity to come before you in services, to be pure in heart, Father, because we've confessed our sins. And Yahweh willing, none of us have done anything that would change that this morning, Father, or through the night. We thank you for hearing our prayers, and we pray that they're as sweet a smell as this incense, Father. And in the scriptures you mention, at least once, but you mention that you change not. And we do thank you for that, Father, because that is one of those things that strengthens us. The Sabbath doesn't change from being the seventh day of the week. Trespass doesn't change. You change not from the very beginning, before you even created man or the earth and the heavens that surround it. And we thank you for that, Father, because as we stop and we think, maybe possibly before we pray, we think about those things, Father, that don't change because it's the way you've established them. And we thank you for that because it does give us strength, almost like a foundation, something sure to stand on that you don't change. And that's part of what builds trust in us because we can trust that we all keep the laws of Yahweh and nothing changes. So we ask that you continue to strengthen us, Father, with these sayings, these bits and parts of wisdom that you give to us as we read and study the Scriptures. Continue to work with us. Continue to help us to have pure hearts, pure minds, cleansed of any and all unrighteousness, so that we can worship you perfectly, Father. We ask that we thank you for protecting us in every way that you have with the weather and with everything else. And we pray that you continue to do so. And we again thank you, Father, for allowing us to be a part of this family that you are creating, this priesthood. We thank you. And we ask these things of you as seed of the last day's witness, the great Kwan Yisrayl Hawkins, and through our most ahad and honorable high priest and king, Yeshua Messiah. Hallelujah, Yahweh. Praise Yahweh. And it's my great opportunity to turn the services over to the daughters of Yahweh.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We are in for a power-packed spiritual learning experience. Be prepared to take notes. Please stand as I welcome our first speaker.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Please be seated. Okay, the title of my speech this morning is Be Like the First Beast. And we're going to be focusing in Revelation. Now, this is the inspired revelation that was given to Yochanan the Apostle by Yeshua, by the authority of Yahweh. And we have to remember, anytime we're talking about prophecy, it's always Yahweh's prophecy that's inspired and given to the overseer by Yeshua, and the overseer taught us. We always have to remember, always go back to the beginning. Okay, and we're going to start off with Revelation 13:11 through 15. And I'm just going to read several of the verses in Revelation 13:11. And I saw another beast come up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, but he spoke like a dragon. And the overseer has explained to us, up out of the earth means multitudes, nations, peoples, and tongues. This is the land masses like the United States, Russia, Europe, Asia, all of the land masses that have people living on it. And if I could go to my, no, not the first slide yet. Okay, from Revelation 6:8, yes, if I could have my first slide, we'll just go ahead and read this. Revelation 6:8, and I looked and behold a pale horse, and the name of him who sat upon it was Death. And power was given to them over a fourth part of the earth. Now, over a fourth part of the earth. And if you look at the slide, you will see there's two pictures of the fourth part of the earth. And you'll notice that the earth is divided into 4 equal sections. Now, the amazing part about this is the equator and the prime meridian was actually inspired by Yahweh, increase in knowledge, and the equator is an imaginary line. It's not actually on the earth. You can't go out in space and see this line going through the middle of the earth. It's just an imaginary line drawn around the earth, equally distant from both poles, the North Pole and the South Pole. And the prime, now this was first used in 1610 AY, in this time period. Okay, now the prime meridian is another imaginary line that goes around the earth from North Pole to South Pole, and it was first used in 1884, and it marks the zero longitude of the earth. Now, the longitude and latitude lines that you see that encircle the earth, the globes that you look at, are only reference points. And what's amazing about this is, over a fourth part of the earth, Yahweh inspired man to create this division, and you say, well, what fourth part of the earth? the fourth part of the earth around the great river Euphrates. If we did not have that part of that scripture, it could be any fourth part of the earth. But Yahweh says, no, it's in that fourth part of the earth. Now, you'll notice that the prime meridian does cut through a couple countries. Disregard that. It's the landmass in that fourth part of the earth in and around the great river Euphrates. And that's how that is. That is how that is decided upon. Now we're going to go on to Revelations 9, 13, and 14. And it says the last Malach, 13, sounded. The last Malach. The last witness, the last day's witness, Pastor Yisrayl Hawkins brought this information to us. Inspired by Yeshua through the authority of Yahweh from the very beginning. We have to remember this. We have to keep this in our minds. Okay? And I heard a voice from the four horns of the golden altar, which is before Yahweh, saying to the last Malach, which had the trumpet, the seventh trumpet, loose the four messengers who are bound in the great river Euphrates. It puts us back into that fourth part of the earth. If I can have my next slide, please. Now, these were numbers and dates that I was able to come up with, and this is your lot, 17, 28, and 74. On 9906, the overseer loosed the four messengers bound in the river Euphrates. Okay, and that's in chapter 28 of the sixth book of Yisrayl. Now, if I can have my next slide, please. This article was released by the Vatican. This was on 9/26/2004, right around the time we were sealed. Now, you got to remember, the overseer says the war doesn't start with the dropping of the first bomb. The prophecies don't come forth unless he studies them out. So the Vatican has been being aware of what was going on, and this was let loose. The Vatican deploys its divisions in Iraq under the banner of NATO. So the Vatican is actually telling the armed forces of NATO what he wants them to do, and the overseer brought this out several times. Mark of the Beast. You can go to the books of Yisrayl, the first book of Yisrayl, the second book of Yisrayl, the sixth book of Yisrayl, the seventh book of Yisrayl. You can read that about how he actually brought this information to us, that the banner of NATO is under the direction of the Vatican, which is in Rome, which is the Catholic Church, which is the first beast, which the United States is trying to become like the first beast. If I got my next slide, please. Now, in Revelation 9:16, it goes on to this banner of NATO and these forces. The number of the army of the horsemen was 200,000. I heard the number of them, and I had showed you this map before, and I'm just showing you the military bases of the United States in that fourth part of the earth, in and around the great river Euphrates. And underneath it is a list of the 10 countries with the highest number of active duty military personnel. China is highest with 2.2 million people. India is second with 1.5 million people. And the United States is next with 1.4 million people. Now, these are the horsemen, the army of the horsemen. Every single country, because of the United States, is wanting to be like the first beast, because as you could see, the United States has 750 military bases in over 80 countries. They are like the first beast because the Vatican has control of all of the countries. Everybody has a diplomatic relations with them. All of the leaders go to the Vatican to get their instructions. And even the United States Congress has a red mass every year at the start of the congressional year where the Catholic priests bless the Congress of the United States, like the first beast. If I could have my next slide, please. Now, this is the 10 NATO countries with the largest militaries, and the United States is the most with 1,395,000 soldiers are at the discretion of NATO. It's a North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The NATO doesn't have its own armed forces. Vatican doesn't have an army, but it has control over NATO. But it has a permanent integrated military command structure composed by both of military and civilian personnel. Now, this is the power of the Vatican. The NATO has a defense college that was formed in Paris. Paris decided to come out of the NATO group of countries. So the NATO Defense College was moved to Rome. And in 1967 was the first, it was moved to Rome in 1966. In 1967, the graduating class, which is the military and civilian leaders of the same rank, was actually had a meeting with Pope John Paul II. And that was the first meeting of several. They have the NATO Defense College will go to the Vatican, the cardinals will come to the Defense College, and everything. So it's amazing how much control NATO has from the Vatican. If I can have my next slide, please. Now, with power, everybody can, okay, money. Money is the root of all evil. The lust of money is the root of all evil. And everybody links power with money. The more money you have, the more power you have. This is the U.S. spending, military spending, and they started it in 1960. The overseer came to, the first radio station broadcast was 1962. He graduated from college in 1959. The U.S. military spending from 1960 to 2023, which is 63 years, was $22.357 trillion. Okay? Now, from 1960 to 2005, which is 45 years, which was right before the overseer released the four messengers, which was the quartet, the United States spent a little bit over $10 trillion for 45 years. The four messengers were released, and in that 18 years to 2023, if you include the 2024 budget that got passed, $13.5 trillion is spent just in the United States, just for soldiers, just for war. That's all it's for. And if I could have my last slide, please. This is from Revelation 9:17. And it says, "And in my vision I saw the horses and those who sat upon them like this. They had breastplates of fire, jacinth, and brimstone." And then we know that the overseer explained that this is the colors of the nuclear bomb. And we do know that the nuclear bomb was dropped by the United States at Hiroshima on 8/6/1945. To prove the point, 3 days later, they dropped another nuclear bomb on Nagasaki on 8/9/1945 and totally obliterated those two cities and wiped out almost the whole population. And if you look at the map on your screen, first beast is the United States. Be like the first beast. The second beast is the United States. Be like the first beast. All of those countries over there in that fourth part of the earth, in and around the great river Euphrates, those are their nuclear weapons. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the next speaker.
Shabbat Shalom, please be seated. The title of my speech today is Being Prepared Shows Love. Being Prepared Shows Love. And I'm going to start out in the second book of Israel, chapter 10, verse 42. It says, "There is a spiritual love that completely overshadows and overwhelms the little fleshly desires we are experiencing now for one another. This is the spiritual love that is brought about by spiritual companionship." I want you to write that down on your paper. spiritual companionship that King David spoke so much about in the Psalms. I hope to get to cover that in detail one day, brethren. The righteous fellowship that he experienced with Jonathan, if you remember, surpassed that of the love for a woman. Okay, now, this is not a lustful kind of love. This is the kind of love that we should be building and experiencing here at the house of Yahweh with one another. Okay? The longer we're in the house of Yahweh and the longer we keep the laws of Yahweh, we should be building this bond with one another, right? So much so that when you see one person struggling or having a problem, that you would actually pray for them or fast for them, weep for them, feel what they feel, right? And if someone is honored in the house of Yahweh, that you would rejoice with them, that you would be glad for them, right? This is a pure, righteous type of love or ahab. Now, what we need to ask ourselves is, am I truly developing that for every person in the house of Yahweh? Well, how do you know whether you are or not? What do we think about one another? How do we help one another? These are the kind of things that show the love, show the ahab. In the 4th book of Israel, the reverence of Yahweh, number 18, verse 22, Pastor says, you're going to see that unless your life is snuffed out here, in the next few years, you're going to see the rich growing hungry. You will see that hunger among those who Yahweh is not called and who are not prepared for these days ahead, that he has given you the knowledge to know what is coming. Yes, everyone here should know that. We should be preparing as we have been teaching you to do. I want to say that again. We should be preparing as we have been teaching you to do. You are going to see them grow hungry. Okay, now I wanted to talk a little bit about the storms we had the last couple days, okay? Now, this shows, at a time like this, it shows whether we're prepared or not, doesn't it? How many of you had enough water drawn up when the wells went kaput? Show of hands? Great. How many of you were scrambling and didn't know what to do? Be honest. You don't have to raise your hand. The phone calls start coming in. I don't have any water. Right, the electricity is out. Well, when are you going to get that turned back on? That's actually the city of Clyde, or the state of Texas. Well, do you know it's my day off? It's preparation day? I do understand that. It's my day off, and it's preparation day. And I'm serving you. I want you to think about it. It's okay to need something, and it's okay to ask for a prayer. But how are we asking? How do we ask? And do we show that great ahab? My title again is, Being Prepared Shows Love. So here's what I would like everybody to do. I'm going to give you a scenario that possibly could take place one day. I don't know, I'm going way out on a stretch here. We might have a nuclear war. We might not have water or electricity one day. I know, it's a stretch. We, the ones that have been warned about this for years and years and years by the Great One, we should be prepared for any type of catastrophe that might come up. And I don't say that to make anyone feel bad. Any of the 80 phone calls that we received yesterday, male, female, everyone. I say this because we are a people that have been taught by the greatest teacher in the world, and we should be prepared for anything. was only one day. And I know we had to go to sleep without electricity, and we had to actually wake up without electricity, and it was our day off, the day we usually do our laundry and our cooking and everything. But look at you, all made it here. And you look so beautimous. This shows that it can be done. We can do it. We don't need all the help from the outside world. We can do these things because why? We are the people of Yahweh. Now we know we're going to see the rich growing very, very hungry, and we've already seen these things begin to take place. Anyone that watches the news can see that we are in a time period that our overseer's been getting us ready for many, many years. You know, he's going to be a little upset that he didn't get to see it through. But he already told us what we were going to be facing. In the third book of Israel, chapter 3, verse 52, it says, right now, it's going on in a small way. When the people in the world start dying, brethren, you are going to see a totally different thing take place. This is what Yahweh is warning you of when he says, cleanse yourself, purify yourself, and get ready. Get ready. Get ready. This is coming. 10,000 are going to fall at your right hand. But, read it with me. If you are prepared, it will not come near you. Praise Yahweh. Now that means to prepare not only physically and having the amount of water drawn up, making sure that we can get by for a few hours without electricity, but that means also preparing our minds so that we can be strong enough to handle the setbacks. Okay, again, I'm speaking to women. We tend to be a little emotional. Everyone on that side that has a daughter or a wife knows women tend to be a little emotional. Yeah, but I don't have any water. I can't brush my teeth. I don't even... Okay, if we prepare ourselves spiritually, we're going to be ready for the things that we're going to have to go through physically, right? We're going to be strong enough to handle it. Yes, I know it was rough, because guess what? I just got done cleaning my house and pouring all the water out from the freeze. And I said, why did you do that? So, although I knew that I couldn't call anyone because I would probably be the one that I would have to call to do a work order, I was a little bit embarrassed because I just got done dumping out all the water that I could have used to flush my toilet. No, maybe I couldn't drink it anymore. It wasn't really fit for that. But I could have used it for something. True or false? So emotional, women, when I'm talking about us, I'm talking about all of us. It's how we handle our setbacks, though, where we're being judged. You know, we can throw ourselves on the ground, kick our feet, and have an emotional temper tantrum. Or we can show Yahweh and our brothers and sisters the true love and ahab by just getting through it, right? Just getting through it. And the more we study and the more closer we draw to Yahweh, the easier it's going to be for us to get through it. Now, number one, there were a few of you that didn't have your cell phones charged, and you called me and you said, my phone's going to die, I've only got 2%, if you need me you're going to have to call so-and-so, but the electricity's out over here and I need some help. There are things we can do. We can always make sure our cell phones are charged when we have electricity. Because Pastor said we don't know when we're not going to have it. It's not like the electric company calls you up and says, storm's coming. You're not going to have electricity. Be prepared. But remember the 5 wise and the 5 foolish virgins? They knew that it might take place. Well, they knew that it was going to take place, and they stored up. The 5 wise ones did. And the other ones were probably saying, look, can I come over and charge my phone? I know you bought one of them fancy little solar chargers for $30. No, we can all buy one of those fancy solar chargers for $30, right? Remember the widow who had the mites, and we talked about this in class the other night. Yeshua marveled, and he said she put in more than all those rich people. It doesn't matter how little or how much money we have. We can sacrifice a meal or something to get a few things that might help us through. Because whether it be, I don't know if you still have any vices, I won't name them, I don't want to do that. But there's something that we can do to be able to get something that we might need. True or false? Okay, so I want us to do that because being prepared shows great love. It shows ahab. In the fifth book of Israel, chapter 20, verse 19, it says, this thing just shows how safe you are and how fragile that safety and security is even here in the United States. And Pastor was talking about something that was going on. Do you think the government can protect you? Under certain circumstances, it can't. When the grid goes down, the grid goes down. Even the people that work at the electric company don't have electricity when the grid goes down. Does everybody understand that? Raise your head up and down if you do. So it doesn't really matter. We can call the electric company, we could call the water company, we could call the office, we could call everybody. But if there's nothing that can be done until Yahweh allows the circumstance to change, it can't be fixed, right? But what can we do ahead of time? It begins with a P. Prepare. People can turn overnight, it says. This is the reason I told you, you need to be prepared. This is exactly what Yahweh teaches you in these words, peculiar people, that we're going to get into deeper today. You're a peculiar, prepared people. You have to learn these things. And in the sixth book of Israel, chapter 5, verse 3, it says, I noticed the other day that there was this guy talking about your cars being shut down after a nuclear explosion. Guess what? There's going to be a nuclear explosion, and if this is the first time you're tuning in, you better get ready. There's going to be a nuclear explosion. We see these things coming to pass. They're not getting any better. It's like a woman giving birth. The pains are coming now very frequently. They're trying to make it seem like, we averted another catastrophe with the economy. Every time they do this, the people, they get lulled to sleep. The people of Yahweh, we get prepared, right? Prepared. Don't get lulled to sleep. Pastor says we probably won't know when it's going to strike. And that's what this man was bringing out. You need to be prepared, Pastor said. What he was specifically talking about was if your car broke down and you were 50 or 100 miles from home. He was saying there's no way that you would be able to walk that far. Most people are not able to walk this far because they're not used to it. It would probably take you several days to walk this far. I want us to realize, a lot of times we're like, oh, I got to walk, or I don't have a car, or I have to do this, or I have to do that. Pastor, everything that Pastor allowed us to, the circumstances he allowed us to be in, was to build our strength. Not to cause us to suffer, but to build our mental strength, our spiritual strength, and our physical strength so that we could be ready for this time period. I put in the gematria the title of the speech, which was Being Prepared Shows Love. The numbers that came up were 258, 2271, and 1548. 258 in the Hebrew means to unify, to go one way or another. Let's go the way of the wise, okay? Let's go the way of the wise servants and the wise virgins and be prepared. 2271, a partner or companion. Do you remember when I told you to remember that word spiritual companionship in the first book of Israel quote that I wrote? Spiritual companionship. We make the load lighter on everyone when we are prepared. And even if we're not prepared, suck it up and wait on Yahweh. Number 1548, to shave or to lay waste. This is coming. This speech is to let us all know not to pour our water out like I did. Everything can be used for something. that even if we make a mistake and pour all our water out, let us not lay down on the ground and kick and scream and have a little tantrum, but let's be prepared next time to be able to withstand whatever test Yahweh puts us through, because one day it's not going to be a test, it's going to be the real thing, and we need to show that we were trained by the greatest teacher in the world. Please stand as I welcome the great priest in Yahweh's house.
Praise Yahweh. Remember, the Peaceful Solution teaches us that preparation is a key to success. You know, as we just heard, Yisrayl Hawkins' goal was to prepare us for what was coming, mentally, spiritually, physically, and now that needs to become our goal, to continue that preparation and be ready for those who are coming. So to continue to hear about Yahweh's protection, we turn the services over to the great deacon, Michael Ossoff.
Shabbat Shalom, great saints of Yahweh, please be seated. Yahweh's peace be with each and every one of you, and all of you out there, as our great teachers say in TV land. Yahweh's protection. I had another search that I was going to bring, but there was like an urgency for some reason to do this one, and some things had come up that are just going to blow your mind when you see this. If you'll turn over to Psalms 91, and this is where the search was found of all places. Psalms 91, and in verse 2, and I call this Yahweh's protection chapter of Psalms. Under Yahweh, under your shadow, O Yahweh. But in verse 2, this is where the search was found. We say to Yahweh, you are our refuge and our fortress. You, O Father Yahweh, you are our Father. In you we will trust. We will trust in Yahweh. Well, how do we trust in Yahweh? By obedience to what the house of Yahweh is teaching us. As the previous speaker said, we need to listen. And you know, it's not expensive to prepare. You can get everything you need, even those who don't have a lot. You can get candles, you can get buckets to store water. Just ask your counselors for little tips and things that you can do to prepare. And you can be prepared. Yahweh will open the door for you. Okay, so let's get into this. This is Yahweh's protection. And the letter skip on this was 25,126 letters between each letter. And let's go to the search. Okay, let me let you get a screenshot. And then a screenshot of this. Okay, I have to move a little quickly. I just knocked over the stop sign. Okay, so, all right. So right here, excuse me, we have Yahweh's protection. Yahweh's protection. And the first thing that came up was right here. Right here, and that's prophecy. The prophecies show us, through the teachings of Yisrayl and the great priesthood, shows us the warnings and the things we need to look out for and be prepared so we can receive Yahweh's protection from his house. Prophecy. Okay. And of course, right here, 3 and 4 is 2 witnesses. 2 witnesses, and that connects to Yahweh's protection. 5, we have the sprinkling. The sprinkling. Ashes of the red heifer, the ash water that we get sprinkled with. Okay. Now this next one, there's kind of 2 sections to this. Okay. So we have, let's see. Okay. 5. Then 6, right here. 6 goes all the way across, and 7. 6 and 7 is creeping molecules. You know, Yahweh's created these things to protect his house, protect the people. Creeping molecules, okay? Then most importantly, number 8 and number 9 is listening and obedience is Yahweh's protection. There is no protection without your obedience to what the house of Yahweh is instructing you to do to protect your life. If you're not obedient to it, you're not going to have the protection you need to get through the times ahead. Okay? Then over here we have Debar Yahweh, or laws of Yahweh. Okay, right there. Right here, priesthood. Priesthood connects to Yahweh's protection. The men and women ordained to guide us and help us prepare for what's coming. Okay, now this next one, the word rainbow came up, and I just dismissed it and went on and didn't think about it, didn't even mark it. Well, then the week before Pentecost, the fourth day, a picture was sent to me, and if you could pull up the first picture. This picture was sent to me, and if you look right in the center, pointing towards the right, from the top left to the bottom right, you'll see a sword with a rainbow sash across the guard, or the center section. Can I have the enhanced version? See it? That was over the sanctuary. And the sash is on the correct shoulder. And someone said they could see a person there. I didn't take time to look, but it's the same colors as the sash, going from the left shoulder to the right hip, the way we wear it. Okay? So I went back. Let's go back to the codes. So I went back and I pulled up that word rainbow. Okay? So we have 12, 13, and 14. 12, 13, and 14 is guardian cherub with rainbow sword, and it connects to Yahweh's protection. And this came up right before Pentecost, and the protection that we receive from Yahweh's house is obedience to the message that's coming from Yahweh's house. And then we will have that protection we need. Okay, let's continue on. Number 15 up here, the subconscious mind will be our protection when we need it to do this work. Subconscious mind. Okay. Now this one was really, there was a commercial video for the Feast of Tabernacles that was done some time ago. And we have 16, 17, and 18, which is Sukkah, feasts, shadow. Sukkah, feasts, shadow. And if you remember in the commercial, those that you remember, it says, how can this, and it shows a sukkah, protect you from this? And it shows a nuclear explosion. Great commercial. Okay? Then we jump over to right here. Now this, we have 19 and 20. 19 and 20, again, is creeping organisms on the earth. And it connects to number 6, creeping molecules. And the full meaning is creeping organisms and molecules on the earth. Now, creeping organisms and on the earth are the same Hebrew words as in Genesis 1:26. Okay? Those things are created to help protect us. Then we have 21, 22, and 23 is Passover, Hebrew year for 1996, snow. That was Yahweh's protection. Remember the group of people that wanted to come and hurt people here at the house of Yahweh, and Yahweh allowed a snow to come. Passover, 1996, snow. Okay? 24, we have instruction, teachings. 25, we have obedience to the instructions and teachings. And last, what is the greatest protection we can get or have? Is humility to what we're being instructed in. Humble yourselves. We need to humble ourselves to what we're being told. Follow those instructions, and Yahweh says you won't have any problems. Okay, so let's go back to... Now some other words that were found that just didn't have room or time to put in. Essential. Financial protection, informed, and authority. Now, also protection from, and these are the negatives, deadly pestilence, destruction, warfare, Lilith, COVID, evil men, Catholics, and death. We have to remain strong and steadfast in what we have been taught by the great house of Yahweh. Father Yahweh will protect us, but we must do our part by listening to the authority He has placed over us, the great priesthood of Yahweh, who has been appointed to guard and keep His house, His work, and His people from the destruction that's right around the corner and going to be upon us very soon. Great family of Yahweh, Yahweh bless you with a great Sabbath. Prepare. It's not difficult. Go to your counselors, get their guidance. They will help you, and you'll have no problems. Just trust in Yahweh and stand strong. And with that, I turn it back over to the great priest, great Kahan, Zephaniah Hawkins.
Praise Yahweh. I don't know how many of you saw it, but after that storm passed the other night, did you see all the rainbows out there? You know, they were all over, singles, doubles, and a lot of them, if you notice, they looked just like the sash. They weren't like full, but just that portion there that only the house of Yahweh would recognize is that sash that we wear. Praise Yahweh. So to hear more of what's behind this, we turn the services over to the great Kahan, Benjamin Krause Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, great saints of Yahweh. Yahweh's peace be with everyone. Please be seated. Let's go ahead and put up the title slide. We're calling this the real cause of global warming. Okay, and you know, since they're celebrating Gay Pride Month, I thought I would go ahead and contribute. Let's go ahead and look at the next slide. In Matthew 7:13, it says, "Enter in through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and many are those who go that way." And that word broad, it's also a synonym of the word Catholic. For wide is the gate and broad is the way, in Gematria 3:43, and it means to unveil, to uncover. And that's what Yahweh's done through the witness Israel. He showed us what the true cause of global warming, or the real cause of global warming, is. Second number 2058 is interpreter. And this is speaking of Peter on the 7 hills, the interpreter. And we'll get into that as we go along. And 3074 means a wolf. Add those up, you get 5475, and it means secret counsel. It's the word Sadi that Pastor taught us about, where Yahweh said, "Let not my glory be joined to their counsel." This secret counsel, the word Sadi or Sodomites, this Sodomite counsel. Let's go to the next slide. Pastor says in Deception, How Easy One Can Fall Away on 3:610, Sodom was part of this setup. Sodom. The word Sadi, it actually means my secret counsel. You might want to write that down because it's part of the word Sodom. Sodom, of course, was a town that dates way back, Genesis 13. I think we should turn there and read that. Put in the word Sadi, it actually means my secret counsel. You get 3006, which is a secret tag number of the original sons who inspired all this garbage. And 3358 in Greek means the rule or standard of judgment that comes from the 7 hills. This is their rule and standard of judgment, their interpretation of certain scriptures that give them the right to commit sodomy, they think. And the word degree, you know, the 33rd degree of the Masons. Add that up, you get 6364. It's the word Peter. Remember, Peter's the interpreter. He holds the key, they think. They think that they were, remember, they do have the scepter, but they don't use it righteously. Let's go to the next slide. That word broad, in dictionary.com, where he says broad is the way, the word broad is usually perceived as insulting. The meaning is a promiscuous woman. So there's a promiscuous woman on the 7 hills. Put that in, you get 3074. It means a wolf. And it's used in Matthew 7:15 about the wolf in sheep's clothing. It says a wolf of perhaps a jackal, often applied to persons of wolfish proclivities or wolfish characteristics. Put that in, you get 5172, and it means to practice divination. So it's talking about the divining serpent, this wolf, that's sitting on the 7 hills. Let's go to the next slide. Matthew 7:15 says, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves." And put in that word ravenous. You remember the prophecy in Genesis 49 about Benjamin would raven as a wolf. The word ravenous, all of the synonyms are voracious, insatiable, ravening, wolfish, greedy, gluttonous, insatiate, audacious, and gannet-like. Put that in, you get 898. It means to cover, to act covertly. In other words, secretly, behind closed doors. And they think no one knows what's going on behind closed doors, but Pastor revealed everything they're doing. Yahweh shows it in the scriptures. The second number, 5388, means love children. Love children? That word treacherous, or treachery, it means betrayal of trust, deceptive action of nature. Put that in to get 2796, and it means masons. Masons. Let's go to the next slide. Both scriptures about the broad way and the wolf are found on page 733 of your book of Yahweh. And on Yahweh 26, 2022 in our Gematria class, it was about the 3rd or 4th class we did, myself and the great deacon were out in the parking lot after class, and this cloud appeared up over the sanctuary, and it was a picture of a pope wearing the fish hat, and it was at 7:33 p.m., which matches a number on that page. And it means a traveler, wayfaring. Remember the Masons, that's their code, are you a traveling man? And 733 in Greek means a sodomite, homosexual, one who lies with a man as with a woman. Let's go to the next slide. The Clouds of Calamity sermon from 5:10:03, Pastor says, "These are demons that I'm going to show you in Daniel," where Daniel actually describes this in the host that was sent down from heaven to work with Satan among the nations. Put in that quote, you get 10:2:12, which is a sermon Pastor gave on 10:2:12 titled, "The Complications of Global Warming Were Started Years Ago by the Masons." This was given on the Feast of Tabernacles. And by the way, I'm giving you a scaled-down version of the Gematria class we had on 5th day night, where 15 minutes after class, all hail broke loose. Let's go to the next slide. You'll see why. Chapter 13, this is a sermon from 10:2:12. I just said, the complications of global warming were started years ago by Masons. Pastor said, in Jeremiah 23:14, it says, "I have seen the prophets of Jerusalem. These were not Yahweh's prophets. These were fighting against Yahweh's prophets. And they told Jeremiah, don't prophesy to us in the name of Yahweh anymore, or we will kill you." That's the Masons. That's the Sodomites. They were alive and active at that time and building their group of people with the seeing eye, or the all-seeing eye, which traces, as you know, look on a dollar bill and you can trace it all the way back to Egypt. Put in group of people with the all-seeing eye, and Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, and Herodians, they both come up 2274, which means a company. From 2267, a band of bad priests, a society like the Society of Jesus that casts spells. From 2266, to unite, be joined, to charm, join together, as one, like it says on that dollar bill. They're one in their practice of sodomy and trying to bring forth the destruction of mankind, the firmament and man's brain. Let's go to the next slide. This one's Freemasonry, the lawyers that brought false charges against Yahshua and are bringing false charges against the last day's work. From 9:29:12 said, Pastor said, "But the temple that he destroyed, that is, not him, but his grandsons destroyed, was Herod's temple. It wasn't Solomon's temple, it was Herod's temple, the last one that was destroyed. But he moved the Pharisees, Sadducees, and Essenes. Not he himself, but the Herodians. This was a religion that he created that was almost silent to the public. It was a secret society to the public. But with that, he got the work done." Put in secret society of the public, you get 1782, which is the year the Great Seal of the United States with the pyramid with the all-seeing eye was adopted by Congress. And 1497 alludes to Micaiah 3:12. Speaking of this group here, therefore, because of you, Zion will be plowed like a field, Jerusalem will become heaps of rubble, and the mountain of the house of Yahweh like the high places of a forest. That comes out to 1497, which means to seize, to rob, to strip. Remember, these are the thieves that took over the temple. That word strip is used in Micaiah 3 about they stripped the skin from my people. 1497 in the Greek means an image. Yes, they're trying to make mankind in the image and likeness of the gods, and I'll show you how they're doing it. Let's go to the next slide. From the complications of global warming were started years ago by Masons from 10:2:12. Pastor says, if you'll open your scriptures to Jeremiah 23. Now they say that the Masons started in the year 43. I don't believe it is. That's not true. That's not true. They go clear back to Solomon's temple. We know that. And before that. But I'm not talking about, when I say Masons, I'm not talking about bricklayers. That's what it resembles. But these things are steps of life, like the sodomizing of 3-year-old children. They're steps in life or rocks that you lay in life in order to bring together a common goal or a set goal that they've set for themselves, as is shown in Isaiah 14, and also shown who it's led by. Put that quote in, you get 5757, and it means perverters. Yes, they make perverts. They've turned the world upside down. They've made perverts out of the people. And 3454 is from 3453, to initiate into the mysteries. From 3466, a mystery or secret doctrine. Yes, it's a secret teaching, this sodomy. It's part of their religion. A hidden or secret thing, a mystery, through the idea of silence imposed by initiation into religious rites. And the third number, 3487, goes to 226, and it means a mark, a sign, a symbol, or a monument, like you see on that dollar bill, this sign of the sodomites. Let's go to the next slide. Remember, he says it's shown in Isaiah 14:13 and 14, where it says, I will ascend above the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of Yahweh. I will sit in the highest place on the sacred mountain of the congregation. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, and I will be like the Most High. Put that in, you get 2061, it means a wolf, wolves. And 1499 from 1443 means masons. This is the ones behind it. Remember, the goal of Satan is to give you the 666, the mark of the beast. Let's go to the next slide. Remember, Pastor said these are all filthy bricks. They're filthy acts piled one on top of another to reach a certain goal. Put in 1776, which is the number on the base of that filthy pyramid, and put in filthy bricks with it, you get 2478, and it means to pervert. And 2478 in Greek means strong man, used in Mark 3:27, where he says, you can't enter the strong man's house unless you first bind the strong man. And Pastor told us about an interview that he read about called Interviewing Deprogrammers in the House of the Strong Man, Sodomy is the Key. Talk about that. The second number, again, 3466, means a mystery or secret doctrine. Mysteries, religious secrets. It's something that they're doing to people that are bringing their minds down and bringing the firmament down to destroy mankind. This is the goal of Satan. This is Satan's goal. Let's go to the next slide. Pastor says in the sermon from 10:2:12 and verse 27, now I'm going to tell you something that the Masons came up with years ago that I've been reading about. And this, he read it about the article I just showed you. It's not a pleasant thing, but they talk about sodomy. If you want to get it, I can get it for you and read it. They talk about sodomy or sodomizing children before they reach the age of 3 years old. Now this I know is sick, and you can barely stand what I'm telling you at this time, but this comes from the worship of Satan. The Masons worship Satan. They don't worship Yahweh. Herod let it be known. I don't want any of your baloney. I don't want any of it. Not Christianity, not Jewish, not anything. And he started fighting against it, and he's still fighting against it. That is the Herodians, which exist and control Rome and control the armies of the earth. But they say this opens up a third eye. Now, if you want to get it and read it, you can, but I'm not saying anything more about it. Made pastor sick to his stomach to talk about these things. Put in that quote, you get 5516, when Greek is the abbreviation for 666. That's the mark that Satan's trying to give this whole world. Let's go to the next slide. Sermon from 6306 in verse 122, pastor says, sodomy is the worst thing a person can add to this list, because sodomy, I don't know how to explain this except for the fact this goes straight to the brain. Yahweh shows us in the scriptures that it goes straight to the brain and it can be transferred from generation to generation going to the brain. Now, along with the rest of this mixed in the body with the bacteria that we get from sodomy, they start to break down the body. But it breaks down the mind also, and this is the reason the Hebrew word here shows that it's confusion, that it brings confusion. Put in that quote, you get 5480, that means a mark, an image formed, like image on that they're trying to make you into, the image of the beast, what's shown on the back of that dollar bill. And 3382 is the second number, and it means a descent. To bring them down, to bring you down, take down, took them down, cast down, subdue, to fall. This is her plan to bring mankind down. The firmament and man's brain. Let's go to the next slide. This sermon was titled, The Firmament is Being Poisoned by Viruses Made by Man in Fulfillment of His Illegal Lust. For more information, please read the 6/2000 issue of the Prophetic Word magazine entitled The Real Cause of Global Warming. Pastor says, but they know the gases, the greenhouse gases. It's proven. There's plenty of proof showing that this is not the cause. The firmament. I'm going to try to explain this in detail in letters, but the firmament is alive. And get this in your mind. It's like a giant brain that governs the earth like your brain governs your body. Your brain is working with billions of kingdoms. They're micro kingdoms, but they're kingdoms, and of course, it uses these kingdoms to keep your body well. Now, if your brain gets sick, if you put something in there to confuse the signals of your computer, or if a computer virus, you're familiar with that, if a computer virus gets in a computer, it starts sending out the wrong signals to the body, to the kingdoms, that is working with you, or with, to get the word written up there on the screen and how fast it goes up on the screen. And then something, it will just shut it down. And that's when you hear the office screaming. Well, you hear the universe screaming right now. Put in that quote, you get 1008, and it means house of God. And 6049 means feed, shepherding the flock of God. And the third number, 6364, or 6049 in the second number, 6049, means enchanter, sorcerer, to act covertly or secretly, to practice magic, and to cloud over. And the third number, 6364, is the word Peter again. So you see it's this house of Peter, this house of God on the 7 hills causing this. Let's go to the next slide. In this interviewing the deprogrammers in the house of strongman, sodomy is the key. The interviewer says, so with each sodomy, the house of the strongman gets stronger and stronger? And he says, that's right. Put in with each sodomy, the house of the strongman gets stronger and stronger. You get 746, and it means principality, rulers, magistrates. Second number, 4476, means breeding. Remember, they're breeding it into the people. It's generational as well. 4476 goes to 3817 in Greek, and it means to sting as a scorpion. And the third number, 3882, means Leviathan, symbol of Babylon, serpent or whale. Notice the article there on the deprogrammers is http://whale.to. Let's go to the next slide. Let's talk about the Leviathan. Pastor says here that Leviathan, this is 10:9:12 sermon. He says Leviathan means a mass of swarming, creeping things in the ocean and atmosphere. Okay, now the word also has the meaning of whale, large mass of microorganisms, and they translated it whale because they didn't know what else to put there because they didn't know about microorganisms. Put in the mass of microorganisms in mourning, and you get 2478, and it means to pervert. And 2478 in Greek means strong man. So you see the house of the strong man, because of the perversions that they're teaching from the 7 hills, has weakened the atmosphere. The microorganisms are mourning. They're crying out in pain. It's like we've severed their arms and legs, remember, or their hands and arms to help us. Now look at the third number, the second number, 1454. 1454, the phonetic spelling is gay. Gay. And there's the gay pride flag that they're celebrating this month, 666. Is it any wonder it's in the 6th Roman month? The number 6? And a 6-colored flag? Yahweh's rainbow has 7 colors. Let's go to the next slide. This is from the 10.2.12, Complications of Global Warming were started years ago by the Masons. He says, when I say Masons, I'm not talking about bricklayers. That's what it resembles, but these things are steps of life like the sodomizing of 3-year-old children. They're steps in life or rocks that you lay in life in order to bring together a common goal or a set goal that they've set for themselves, as is shown in Isaiah 14, and is also shown who it's led by. Put that in, you get 2023, that's this year. And the second number, 2007, means attack. That's the year that Pastor put out the True Cause of Global Warming magazine. He put it out in the 6th Roman month. Put in 6th Roman month, it means invade and attack. It's number 1464. It means to invade, attack. Well, what's this talking about? What are they invading and what is it attacking? Let's go to the next slide, because remember they said Satan has a goal. So what is the grand objective of Satan? There's that number 1464, and it means invade, attack. There's the number 2007 again, it means attack. Pastor showed you how they're attacking this atmosphere, and they're attacking the minds of mankind through sodomy, through their teachings that come from the 7 hills. Who am I to judge? Add that up, you get 3471, which goes to 3466, a mystery or secret doctrine. But it's not a mystery to us, is it? Is it a mystery to the house of Yahweh what's taking place here? Look at the goal. Here's the goal they've set. Look at the pyramid. Here's the filthy bricks. Each filthy iniquity and sin stacked one on top of another to reach that enlightenment, which is called, confusion of the brain. Because you're not going to open a third eye. You're not going to get used to your subconscious mind through what they're doing right here. They're thieves and robbers. They're trying to get it a certain way, and they can't have it that way. They've got to come to the house of Yahweh to get it, okay? That's how they got to get it. So remember, let me show you the last slide, because remember, this is the grand objective of Satan. So put in the word invade and attack. You get 666, which is the mark of the beast. And 974 means a booklet. Add that up, you get 1640, and it means smaller in size. From 1646, least, very little thing. From 3398, the word micros, the microorganisms. That's what they're invading and attacking. And if you remember the 12th book of Israel, where these sermons about the Masons came from and how this is destroying the firmament and the brains of mankind, there was a great song written in the back of it about these mourning microorganisms. And it says, but iniquity has abounded and our sins reach to the sky. Though the windows of heaven are open, they mourn, they weep, they cry. No longer can the micro-kingdoms overcome what man has done. The diseases from our sins have reached them. They can't run or hide. These man-made viruses that the land just cannot take are vomited into the air and put the firmament at stake. Now look here. The viruses invade and viciously attack. You see that? Invade, attack. The friendly bacteria that never, ever fight back. Now this storm took place on 6/1/2023. 16 years to the day after Pastor put out the Real Cause of Global Warming prophetic word magazine. And as soon as this scaled down version of this sermon was given, and if you'd like to get a copy of it, maybe we can get it to you. All hell broke loose to show that Yahweh, that Pastor is exactly right. The microorganisms are in mourning, but we're here to fix that, right, House of Yahweh? Don't give up. Don't give up. Don't give up on Yahweh. Stay in the house of Yahweh and keep working, and let's bring this sodomite system down once and for all. And at this time, it's my great privilege and opportunity, if you'd all please stand, to turn it over to the great Kohan Stephania Hawkins.
Praise Yahweh. You know, the great Khan Benjamin made a great point. You know, he showed this very broad way of destruction that we see the world headed. But remember Yeshua's words in Matthew chapter 7, verses 13 and 14. He said, enter in through the narrow gate. In verse 14, because straight is the gate and narrow is the way which leads to life, and few there are who find it. And you can connect that word few to Isaiah 24, verse 6, that the earth is going to be burned, but few men left. So to continue here, to hear more about this broad way of destruction the world is headed into, we turn the services over to the great Khan, Ilya Heiler Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Everyone, please be seated. The peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Of course, as they try to tell you in the news, this COVID pandemic is over, but remember the words of the 7th Malach. They still ring true to this day. It's not going to end until the nuclear war comes and removes this virus and a lot of other diseases floating in the environment. This come out this morning, reported by CBS and ABC, as COVID cases could be ticking up in New York. Wastewater data shows most wastewater plants in the city show high levels of the virus detection. And if you remember, they were testing the wastewaters even in Austin, Texas, and they could tell the uptick in the spread of this virus. Now, the wastewater tested positive before the numbers came out, but it also says that the reported cases have not jumped, but fewer people are getting tested than earlier in the pandemic. So case numbers are less reliable indicator of the COVID-19 spread. But one thing it doesn't lie is the wastewater's testing positive. Remember what's in the wastewater. Remember how it's eliminated from the body. Toxins, disease, impurities. And then think about what was just brought, and then you're going to see some more things in the news today about how confusion is spread through toxins, disease, bacteria. And it's actually being promoted. It's being promoted as it's okay. That's the sickness in the mind of this world today. But of course, along with the COVID pandemic came lots of money. And if you want to take a gander, I'll ask you, who do you think the biggest collector of COVID pandemic money was in the United States? Well, of course, it was the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church, with billions in reserve, took more than $3 billion in taxpayer-backed pandemic aid. It says, here's a maddening pandemic fact. The Catholic Diocese in the United States and other institutions backed by the Roman Catholic Church took more than $3 billion in taxpayer-funded government aid as part of the Paycheck Protection Program, also known as the PPP, which does not have to be paid back. The money's given to you, and that's it. It's forgiven. And that's according to an investigation by the Associated Press. That appears to make the Catholic Church the single largest beneficiary of the emergency aid program. It goes on to say, while availing upon taxpayer-funded payments designed to keep small businesses afloat and their employees in their jobs during the economic shutdown, the AP reports the Catholic Church was sitting on $10 billion in cash in short-term investments and other available funds. So they actually had $10 billion in cash reserved, and they still collected another $3 billion for themselves. So COVID makes money for the wicked. Continuing on, you're also going to see here, and this is something that's coming out more and more, and it's something that we need to be aware of. It says America faces unprecedented food insecurities. And it says a new study has found that the growing number of people are going hungry as government benefits are reduced and grocery prices soar. The one thing that's very interesting, they say that vegetable oil will be very hard to get by the end of the year. And another very common food that you would think would never run short, and of course many reports are saying that it hasn't run short and it isn't going to run short, is rice. But when you say it's going to run short, guess what occurs? The price skyrockets and rice becomes more expensive. Even though there's plenty of rice on the market, more money is made. It's a very interesting and tactical way of making profits on your product by making it sound like it's very rare, or it's going to be less available, and you can up the price. But that's what they're doing, and of course they're pricing many people out of food because inflation is high. Now, of course, Uganda, here you see that a new anti-gay law in Uganda calls for life in prison for those who are convicted. They're saying they want this completely out of their country. They don't want it in their country. And it says Uganda has passed one of the world's toughest anti-gay laws that calls for life imprisonment for anyone convicted of homosexuality. Uganda President Yoweri Museveni signed the Anti-Homosexual Act on Monday despite widespread condemnation from many Western governments and human rights activists. Homosexual relations were already illegal in Uganda, a religious conservative East African nation, but the new law levies harsher penalties for LGBTQ people. One thing that's very interesting, the Catholic Church won't like, if you molest a young boy, it's a death penalty in Uganda now. There'd be a lot of people wearing red clothing die. You know, the world is getting sick of this. They're getting sick of what they see take place in society. And of course, the death sentence comes when the sin is committed. You don't have to help with it. And people can be rehabilitated or educated. That is possible. But of course, the world is getting sick, completely sick of it. You see here, the UN objects to Uganda's anti-LGBT law. And it says the global body called for an end to the criminalization of consensual relations. And it says he added, this is Gutierrez, who is the governor of the UN. He resides over it right now. Again, calling on all countries to decriminalize consensual relations and transgender people everywhere. To put it clearly, no one should be penalized and jailed. No one should be penalized, jailed, and criminalized for whom they love. Well, where did he get that instruction from? Who told him that? Who lied to him? Don't forget, Pope says homosexuality is not a crime. That's who leads this Western body, this group that is promoting this. And remember, Pope Francis criticized laws that criminalize homosexuality as unjust, saying God loves all of his children just as they are called on the Catholic bishops who support the laws to welcome the LGBTQ people into the church. Being homosexual is not a crime, Pope Francis said. Remember, he said it's a sin, but it's not a crime. Then you see here in Turkey, gays not welcome. That's President Erdogan's statement. And he says President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and I probably butchered his name, we'll just say President Erdogan, who portrays himself as a defender of traditional Islamic values, has once again labeled the opposition as LGBT, so he's saying that's who he's standing against, and insisted that liberal West ideology will never infiltrate his ruling party or its national allies. He goes on to say that this way of life will not be allowed. In fact, let me quote what he says. The Turkish leader vowed to protect sacred family values in his victory speech on Sunday. That was this last week. With these things taking place, of course, you see here in the United States, you're going to see a little bit on this debt ceiling that they were trying to pass. And I hope everyone understands the insanity of what's going on when you have a country that's $31 trillion and growing in debt. They're not generating enough income to pay their bills, so the answer is raise your credit limit. It's like for your own budget, let's say you owe $1,000 a month and you're only making $900. Well, you have this credit card and you say, well, I'll up my credit card another $2,000. That'll give me money to spend. Well, sooner or later, you charge your credit card and you max it out. So you can't pay the bill. What do? Well, let me up it another $2,000. So now I got another $2,000 to spend. But you're not paying the bill. And nations are getting aggravated with this because this is being used to wage war with nations. This is being used to sanction nations. The United States has found a way through the dollar, and you're going to see a lot. There's one news agency that did a great job of showing this de-dollarization and why the dollar is so powerful and why countries are wanting to get away from it. They do a great job explaining it. Because through this dollar being the reserve, replacing gold in World War II and then moving up to the petrodollar in the 1970s, it has gained a stranglehold on all cash reserves. No matter what country, no matter what style of reserve, whether it's the peso, the yuan, the yen, the dollar suppresses it. It strangles it. It controls it because everything is based on the dollar. If you ever look at currency exchange, you'll see peso equals this to the dollar. Rubles equal this to the dollar. Everything is based on the value of a dollar. And of course, countries are getting very frustrated because the United States just upped their credit limit again. They're not paying their bills, but they upped their credit limit again. And then you see here that Blinken outlines conditions for true peace in Ukraine. And he goes ahead and says that what is going to have to occur is Ukraine will have to be turned completely back over to all the territories, even the ones that Russia has taken, including Crimea, will have to be turned back over to Ukraine. And of course, Moscow in turn has insisted that peace can only be achieved if Ukraine becomes a neutral state by dropping its bid to join NATO and recognize Russia's territorial acquisitions. So Ukraine wants one thing, or the Vatican wants one thing, and Russia wants another. Well, you also see here dealing with China, which is building tension. Remember the tension with Taiwan. 80% of Chinese blamed the United States for Ukraine conflict, and that was a study that was conducted, and it says a majority of those polled distrust Washington and view Russia favorably. Now, you're also dealing with countries. Remember the countries that the Pope has never visited, and this is in the history. Russia, no Pope. China, no Pope. They don't have great relations with the Vatican. You're also going to see in Japan where these scientists, these brilliant scientists they call themselves, these are the same people that tell you if you cook pork long enough you can eat it. You can also eat the roaches of the sea. They're telling you now, and they're doing this. They're raising these flounders in this toxic water, the Fukushima water, and they're saying that we're going to dump this and the water is okay. Watch, we're already raising fish inside the facility and you can eat these things. Now, these are the same people that will tell you you can drink recycled sewer water because you can't taste it. It's still there, but if you can't taste it, it's okay, right? Think of the brilliance of people that tell you these things. And then, of course, you're going to see the BRICS system, and they come out openly saying their whole job is to remove the dollar. They want to get rid of the petrodollar, the dollar in general, the dollar as a world reserve currency. They want to replace it, and they're striving very hard. That's going to create a lot of tension. Remember, hurt not the oil and the wine. And then also going along, the earth is sick. That is a huge article that came out this week. And notice what they say is causing the earth to be sick. They're not exactly right, but they're going in the right direction. It is human activity. It's not driving your car down the road. It's not using aerosol, and they show that aerosol is the least of the worries. It's the conduct of people that are saying that homosexuality isn't a crime. That's the kind of things that are making the earth sick, and the earth is suffering. Remember that. You know, always think about what goes into the city water supply and who puts it there. Think about that very carefully. And then, of course, you're going to see Ukraine, reports showing that it could turn nuclear. Russia is saying that they're going to start, they have relocated these nuclear weapons and they've used them and they're ready to use them. And then China, the last thing with China coming out, showing that when China attacks the United States, and this is being planned and it's being shown, it's not a hidden thing, that China will attack with more of an electronic attack than they will a nuclear or a bomb or jets, or we think of Pearl Harbor. But they're actually going to look to shut down the gas, the food, and the electrical. That's what China has said. If you can do that, you can shut America down. And many countries know that because Americans, whether we like this word or not, we are spoiled. We found out this last week how spoiled we are. You know, we don't have this, we don't have that. People live like that every day. They literally go through life like that every day. I've seen people that live in houses, they don't have to worry about the electricity going out. There is no electricity. They don't even know what that means. You know, and you think about these things, we're very blessed to have the blessings we have, but some things, as some speakers before me said, there's things that we think we need, we really just want them. And when these things go out, when people don't have them, you're going to see insanity break loose, and China knows that, Russia knows that. And how are you prepared? Well, it's not having your air conditioner ready to go on solar, it's having enough food to eat, it's having your finances in order, because they shut down the electronics, there goes your banking system. It's having the things you need and everything set up before the time comes. When the time comes, it's too late to prepare. Now it's time to actually put it into use. So think about this as you watch the news and the sickness that's in this world today. At this time, if we could please go ahead and play the news.
Ugandan President has signed one of the harshest anti-LGBTQI bills in the world into law. Despite international criticism, the bill will set out to impose the death penalty for acts of aggravated homosexuality, and that includes incest and sexual intercourse while HIV positive. Sex education for the gay community will be criminalised. Under proposed laws, it will be a criminal offence to withhold the identity of alleged perpetrators of aggravated homosexuality to police. That from Uganda.
Back here in Washington, a vote on a plan to raise the nation's debt ceiling while cutting spending could happen as early as tonight in the Senate. The budget deal negotiated between President Biden and Speaker Kevin McCarthy passed in the House Wednesday night. Senate Republicans are now pushing for more spending on defense. An unprecedented and potentially disastrous government default could come as soon as Monday if Congress fails to act.
The 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan was the second worst nuclear accident in history after Chernobyl. More than a decade later, the story is the subject of a new Netflix drama series called The Days, which debuts tomorrow. The meltdown still haunts Japan, and the cleanup will take decades. Now a plan to release a massive amount of treated radioactive water into the Sea of Japan is stirring new fear and controversy. Elizabeth Palmer visited the site to find out what's at stake.
The tsunami that swept ashore in 2011 caused one of the worst nuclear accidents in history, a meltdown of the Fukushima reactors. More than a decade later, engineers are still working to remove radioactive debris. And meanwhile, another problem is piling up in these tanks. Experts for TEPCO, the company in charge, explained they've collected so much radioactive water from rain and runoff over the years, they kept having to add tanks to contain it.
Now, 12 years in, these tanks are almost full of water, more than 1 million tons of it. And TEPCO says the only solution is to start getting rid of it.
By piping it into the sea next to the plant. For Haruo Ono, who's been fishing this ocean all his life, that is an outrage. It's not a garbage dump, he tells me. They say it's safe, but the consequences could be 50 years down the road. There will be no consequences, says TEPCO, because its technology removes all radioactive compounds from the water except one, tritium, which stays in but is diluted to meet international standards. So even when the water is piped back into the sea, TEPCO says fish from Fukushima will be safe to eat. And it's raising some inside the nuclear plant to prove it.
In this lab are fish, flounder, that are living in water with the same level of radiation as the water that is going to be released back into the sea.
The tritium certainly hasn't affected their appetites.
Ooh, these are lively.
And tests show that back in normal seawater, they flush it out of their systems. The International Atomic Energy Agency broadly backs the tritium-laced water release, but will consumers actually eat the fish? Unlikely, says Haruo Ono, who is now looking at the end of his livelihood. The human cost of the Fukushima meltdown will weigh on Japan for decades to come, and so will the dollar cost of the cleanup, nearly $90 billion so far and counting. For CBS Mornings, I'm Elizabeth Palmer in Fukushima, Japan.
When it meets international standards, you got to ask yourself, what exactly are those standards?
And now let's talk about money, the geopolitics of money. Every day we tell you about global trends, about economies under pressure, currencies going up and down. Today we want to discuss how the world economy functions. You see, every country has its own currency, but every country does not use its own currency to interact with the world. So which currency do they use? Mostly the US dollar. The dollar is the currency behemoth of the world. No currency comes close to it. We're talking in terms of usage, oil trade, goods trade. Generally, most of the world trade is settled using the US dollar. Most international transactions between countries and companies are conducted using the dollar. The dollar is also the world's dominant reserve currency. What does that mean? A significant chunk of wealth owned by countries around the world is held in dollars. It's their reserve currency. They save their money in dollars. Global financial systems will collapse without the US dollar. So will the world economy. So the dollar and the US have a lot on their shoulders, and that's not necessarily a good thing. As of 2020, the US had close to $2 trillion in circulation. 2 trillion. And guess what? Half of that is believed to have been in circulation outside America. What about the markets? Around 90% of forex trading involves the US dollar. Forex, of course, is foreign exchange. 90% of this is done in the US dollar. Almost 40% of the world debt is issued in dollars. So how did the dollar become so powerful? It all happened after the Second World War. Until then, all currencies were valued in relation to gold. So gold was the benchmark. Currency values were determined based on this principle. How do they compare with the value of a specified quantity of gold? After the war, the US and its allies came up with an agreement. It was called the Bretton Woods Agreement. Do you know what it did? It replaced gold with the dollar. So all national currencies were valued in relation to the US dollar. That's how the dollar became so important, which is why we now say that the rupee is trading for such and such amount against the dollar. Its value is determined in comparison to the dollar. And this became the trend after the Second World War. Then came the oil boom, and the oil boom led to a dollar boom. You see, the dollar has become the world's dominant currency. It became the dominant reserve currency by the 1970s. So it only made sense for oil trade to be settled using American dollars. Oil transactions were made using American dollars. This came to be known as the petrodollar system. And investors stick to it because the dollar gives them a sense of stability. And that's purely on a business level. On the government side, though, the thinking is changing. Many countries are realizing the pitfalls of being overly dependent on the US dollar. Take Russia, for instance. Before Russia invaded Ukraine, it held more than 600 billion US dollars in foreign reserves. 600 billion. The US weaponized its dollar supremacy. It froze Russia's holdings. And the US can do this with any country it wants to. This realization, the kind of power that America wields, is making many countries extremely uncomfortable. China, for instance, it's skeptical. Russia, of course, has been burnt firsthand, which is why it is pushing BRICS to develop a common currency. BRICS is an acronym for a group of 5 top emerging economies: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, BRICS. Together, BRICS have a 24% share in the global economy. They represent 40% of the world's total population. If they do come up with a common currency, a BRICS currency, it could pose a stiff challenge to the US dollar. And the dollar is not the only one. Let's talk about the euro too, the official currency of 20 European nations. Together they form the Eurozone, countries that use the euro. This region has 344 million people. The euro has one of the highest combined values of banknotes and coins in circulation the world over. Why wouldn't it? Hundreds of millions of people use the euro. The sheer size of the Eurozone gives it a mathematical advantage. Then comes Japan's yen, the world's 3rd most traded currency, also the 3rd biggest reserve currency globally. 4th on the list is the UK's pound sterling. It is the world's oldest currency that is still in use. Next is China's renminbi, better known as the yuan. China wants the yuan to be used as a reserve too. It has sealed deals with countries like Russia, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Japan. What do these agreements do? They allow for trade to be settled directly in the yuan. So China has pushed the US dollar out of the equation. At least with these countries, it is trading directly in the yuan. Reports say it is trying to secure a similar deal with Saudi Arabia, which will be a very big deal. China, you see, is an oil guzzler. It buys a lot of its oil from Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia makes up for 18% of China's total crude oil purchases. In the first 10 months of last year, 2022, the first 10 months, here's how much China paid Saudi Arabia for oil. More than 55 billion US dollars. Imagine that trade being settled without the dollar. And imagine more countries working out similar arrangements. In fact, that's already happening. Brazil and Argentina plan to announce a common currency. Russia and Iran are working on a cryptocurrency backed by gold. India and the UAE are looking for ways to conduct non-oil trade in rupees. Last December, Sri Lanka agreed to use the Indian rupee for all international trade with India. India and Russia also took a big step. The rupee was used for the first time to settle foreign trade between India and Russia. In fact, India's central bank, the Reserve Bank of India, has a whole mechanism in place. It's called the International Settlement of Trade in the Indian Rupee. The goal is quite simple, to facilitate settlement of trade using the rupee. Bangladesh is also considering settling bilateral trade in Indian rupees. The world, you see, is changing. Countries do not want their fortunes to be held in one currency, at the mercy of one country. The big currencies the world over have had it too good for far too long. Their uncontested rally may be coming to an end.
Now let's talk about the world in general. Our planet is ill. This is according to scientists at Earth Commission. It's a Sweden-based climate research group. They've published a new study. It details how 7 out of 8 planetary safety limits have been breached. The co-chair of the group, Professor Joyita Gupta, gave an analogy. She described what would happen if the Earth went to a doctor. A doctor would say that the Earth is really quite sick right now, and it is sick in terms of many different areas or systems, and this sickness is also affecting the people living on Earth. Now, you already know about climate change, how humans have been wrecking the planet, how our unending use of fossil fuels is ruining the world. The Earth Commission's new study looks a little deeper. It's not just about the tipping point. Instead of only looking at when the world will end, it looks at human suffering. Look at this chart. It's a bit complicated, I know. I'll simplify it for you. The 8 slices are the 8 planetary safety limits. The little Earth symbol shows where we are regarding those limits. As you can see, the Earth is far beyond the safe zone in 6 out of those categories. Only for one metric are we still in the clear. That's aerosols. It's an indicator of air pollution. Overall, the global air quality is fine. Some cities like New Delhi and Shanghai might disagree, but according to the study, those are local issues. Overall, the global air quality is not in danger yet, and aren't we glad about that? There's also another category where we aren't completely in the red. Surprisingly enough, climate. But as always, there's a catch. The climate limit is not absolute. It's broken into a safe limit and a just limit. The safe limit is the absolute boundary, denoted by 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial temperatures. That's the global warming danger zone. It was agreed upon during the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement talks. If the world crosses the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold, we are all in grave danger. The polar ice caps will melt, forests will burn, cyclones will destroy the coasts. You know, the beginning of the end. But that's not the only thing that the scientists focused on. They also looked at the just limit. This is 1 degree Celsius above pre-industrial levels. That's when the entire world is not doomed, but heading that way. Humans end up suffering when the temperature crosses the 1 degree Celsius level. Extreme weather events become more common. Droughts, wildfires, and cyclones all become more common and deadly, something that is already happening. People in vulnerable regions begin getting affected, mostly through no fault of their own. It's unjustified suffering. That's why it's called the just limit. And we have breached this just limit. Like we said, certain parts of the world are already facing the consequences. So which parts are we talking about? Mostly the developing world. Think about the devastating floods in Pakistan last year, the massive cyclones hitting Bangladesh and Myanmar, drought in the Horn of Africa. Of course, the effects of climate crisis aren't limited to these areas. Europe is suffering too. Heat waves and wildfires have become common there lately, and the danger will continue to spread. There's one small ray of hope though. The Earth Commission says we can get better. We can cure the sickness. But for that, people have got to start taking action. Governments need to come together to fix these problems. If we don't, then the Earth's illness may become terminal.
A state-sponsored Chinese hacking group denies U.S. allegations of spying on critical infrastructure on the U.S. territory of Guam. And now China is going as far as to flip the blame on the U.S. An embassy spokesperson claiming the U.S. must stop using cyber weapons to carry out espionage and cyber attacks around the world.
Well, we shouldn't be surprised. I mean, China is conducting the most comprehensive cyber operations against the United States, both inside our country and certainly at our military bases around the world. And Guam, right there in the middle of the Indo-Pacific theater, is a prime target for them. And so our viewers understand, if we ever got in a war with China, where our ships, airplanes, rockets, and missiles and troops are involved with theirs in the conventional fight, China would attack our homeland quite massively using cyber capability to defeat our electric grid, our oil and gas distribution, even our financial sector, to try to defeat us at home as much as defeat us in the Pacific region. But during peace, which we have, we should not be surprised at how aggressive they are. We have thousands of people involved in this ourselves. They literally have hundreds of thousands committed every single day to penetrate the United States of America in our homeland and around the world.
Is Russia preparing to use its nuclear warheads? The Kremlin is moving its nuclear warheads. Russian nukes have reached Belarus. The Belarusian president, Alexander Lukashenko, has confirmed the deployment, for this is the first time since the collapse of the Soviet Union that Russia is deploying nukes outside the country. This move is equal parts significant and scary. Russia, remember, has more nuclear weapons than any other country. We are looking at some 5,977 warheads. Many of Russia's nuclear weapons range from about 10 to 100 kilotons. This is the Cheget. It is Russia's nuclear briefcase. It is with the president all the time. Putin can send a nuclear launch order to General Staff Command and Reserve Command units via this briefcase. And Putin has, in fact, openly said that the Kremlin will use all means to defend itself.
At this time, if everybody will please stand. Today's sermon is going to be found in the 13th book of Israel, part 1. It's chapter 22 and was originally given on the 5th Roman month, the 18th day of 2013. It's entitled, Enter My Rest. This message and prophecy were taught in the beginning by Abel. And at this time, I would like to introduce the greatest teacher in the world, the great Kahan Yisrayl, Abel Hawkins.
Shalom, everyone. Here we go. Man, what a crowd. Okay, big young, come on. I hope we got that on tape. That was beautiful. You may be seated. The peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. This picture was taken yesterday evening now after the rocket was complete. And if you notice I had to get bigger here, I guess. What do we got here? Here we go. Now, this looks like the sun here, but it's not the sun. The sun was going down in the other direction. This is east or northeast. So it wasn't the sun, but it shows a nuclear explosion here and a mushroom cloud. They're going to bring this out clearer later. Also, you can see our missile here that he had in the picture earlier, 3 a.m., but without the Constantine sword on top of it to go out conquering. Well, this is shown again, of course, in Revelations. And the number, now they told me the number of this picture, they looked it up. No, this one here. This one. You see the wagon here and the display, the prop, that same thing that Yahweh inspired Yisrayl to do just before the destruction came. Well, here it is, and of course the destructive missiles and the news saying Russia says we're going to do this, And the United States says, we'd rather you wouldn't. And they said, who are you shipping these? The rebels don't have ballistic missiles, so who are they going to use these on? Well, of course, it's pretty well known they're going to use them against the United States if the United States goes on with their plans. Russia is also complaining. These pictures, we'll have them in placemats here very soon, Yahweh willing. Now, if you remember where we left off day before yesterday with Yakishka, and I've got to get through to a certain spot here, so I may have to go over a little since these guys took all my time. The place where we left off was, of course, Yakishka 37, and I want you to remember those scriptures about making the display. That was in Yakishka 4, 1 through 17, and of course it's a little bit strange that would be inspired again in these last days, and no one even thought about it, and all of a sudden it was there after months of work. Then Yakishka 14 shows 13 and 14, when sin reaches its peak, we will see food and water shut off. And of course, sin has reached its peak right now. It's all over the world. The troubles that we're having, you see it on every day's news, and we can't show all the news. We'd be up here all day. But now, if you remember, what we started with to begin with was 2 Corinthians 7 and verse 1, the Spirit perfecting holiness. Well, after, of course, that was 2 Corinthians 7 and verse 1, the Spirit perfecting holiness. You should remember that. And then after that, if you go over to Genesis 1 and read what Yahweh has in plan in the message that was taught from the beginning, Yahweh says, I will make man in my image and in my likeness, according to my likeness, and they will have authority. According to my likeness, and they will have authority. Well, of course, the authority, this over what? All the things, all the creeping things. Now, a lot of other apostles spoke on this. Prophets spoke on this, and they called it different things, but it all amounts to the microorganisms that will obey us. Don't forget Yakishka now, 37:1. This is, well, let's just turn there and read it. Yakishka 37, because this is the authority that Yahweh is speaking of. This is some of the power that mankind, that you're going to receive. You're the ones that will do this. The last will be first, as Yahweh said. And you are the last. You are the remnant. He speaks of you when he speaks of this right here. In Yakishka 37, verse 1, he says, the hand of Yahweh was upon me. That's going to take several sermons right there, but we'll get it later. And he carried me out in the Spirit, another few sermons, Spirit of Yahweh, and set me down in the midst of the valley, which was full of bones. And he caused me to pass by them all around, and behold, there were very many bones in the open valley, and lo, they were very dry. Then he said to me, Son of man, can these bones live? And I answered, O Father Yahweh, you know. Again he said to me, prophesy to these bones, and say to them, O dry bones, hear the word of Yahweh. Dry bones, hear. It's to hear with your ears, dry bones. You're talking to dry bones and say, hear the word of Yahweh. Beautiful, isn't it? Well, of course, you got now, for this, you got Son of Man. Well, the Son of Man, as here in Genesis 1:26, is what he's speaking of, the Son of Man. Son of Man, 1:26. And Yahweh says, I will make man in my image. Now that means all the sons of men that are born after that, and including this man he was speaking to at this time, are these men. You got to remember that this was not written in chronological order by any means, and it was here a little and there a little, and you've got to put it together. And there was a lot of great teaching going on at the house of Abel, which was the house of Yahweh at that time, by Abel, being taught by Abel, in fact. Well, and then, in fact, you could write that scripture, those scriptures down there in Yechezkel 37. If you maybe circle the Son of Man and just write Genesis 1:26, and this will help you greatly with your studies. And there's several other scriptures throughout the Holy Scriptures that you need to put Genesis 1:26. We've covered this before, but get it in your mind in Yochanan 5, and this is, of course, Yeshua speaking, and he's showing that he has received some of that power, and that is the power given him to help him as being high priest over the last day's work, beholding the branch, as prophecy shows that he would. Well, in Yochanan 5, he says, let's see, 5, verse 27, and has given him authority to execute judgment also, because he is the Son of Man. He's the Son of Man. If Christians could get this in their head, and stop, they're thinking he's half God, half Holy Ghost, half this and half that. They really don't know, but they're interpreting that. But it throws them off from understanding the rest of the Scriptures. Every bit of this is given to mankind. He's making mankind in his image. He's not making the gods in his image. He's not gathering fruit from thistle trees. He's not gathering fruit from thorn trees. He's gathering it from his house. He'll have no other work except his house. That's what Amos 3 says. He's only going to fool with one family of the earth. He's only going to deal with that one family, the 12 tribes. And yes, there's other families that came in and were allowed to come in if they would keep the feast, if they would start keeping appointments. But Yahweh showed there wouldn't be many, and these people would not repent. Neither would the 12 tribes till this time comes when you bring them to Yahweh in these last days, and then they will be flowing to you. You may not believe that, but it's going to take place. But if you look back to verse 24, truly, truly I say to you, he who hears my words, the teachings pertaining to the laws and the prophets, believing Yahweh who sent me, has everlasting life. This is the road to everlasting life. This is what I want you to do, is understand the full thing here that Yeshua, of course, was speaking of. Now get those two scriptures in your mind. And verse 25 says, truly, truly, I say to you, the hour is coming, and now is, when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of Yahweh. Now, remember this day, this is my beloved Son, this day of baptism, have I begotten thee. Have I begotten thee. That's the King James Version. Now, so he became the Son of Yahweh. He's the Son of Man, and now he is the son of Yahweh at second birth. Unless you're born again, then if you're born again, then you will be the sons of Yahweh. Not of gods, no, the gods are going to perish, Yahweh said. All the gods every power is going to perish that is not of Yahweh. Son of Yahweh, and those who hear will live. For just as the Father has life in himself, so he has given to the Son to have life in himself. This right here, it carries a real deep meaning that starts in Genesis. Life in himself. Now in verse 27, and has given him authority to execute judgment. Also because he is the Son of Man. He doesn't give that authority to the angels, as they call them, as the King James Version calls them, the heavenly messengers, which are higher than us at this time, but they won't be that way long. When you receive your subconscious mind, you know, this is something they want themselves, but they won't go through these trials and prove themselves. Mankind is doing that. That's the reason Yahweh made you the way he made you, subject to vanity, because you've got to prove to Yahweh that you want this more than anything on earth, more than anything in your life. Praise Yahweh. Now once you do that, then Yahweh can give you this authority that he's talking about here at this time. Do not be astonished at this, for the hour is coming in which all who hear in the graves will hear his voice, and will come forth those who have practiced righteousness. Now every translation says the same thing. Those who have practiced righteousness, but they leave that out. They want you to only believe what the Pope says is what they want you to believe. Only believe what the Pope says, and you will be saved, they say. You won't, you'll be damned. The Pope himself is damned. And will come forth, notice, and will come forth those who have practiced righteousness will be resurrected in order to live, to receive eternal life. And those who have practiced wickedness will be resurrected in order to be damned, or judgment, be given judgment of Revelations 20. Revelations 20. Now, I would beg you again, look, I know a lot of people are here and hearing this, and they're going to look at Mark 3. I want you to go to Mark 3. You're not going to receive this power unless you give it your 100%. And Mark 3 is two things that are plaguing me, making me lose sleep of a night, because I know some are going to fall into these traps. In Mark 3 and verse 33, look at verse 33. And he answered and said unto them, saying, Who is my mother, or my brothers? When he looked around at those surrounding him and said, Behold my mother and my brothers. For whosoever does the will of Yahweh, the same is my brother and my sister and my mother. And I say to you, be turning over to Matthew 19, I say to you, Yeshua is our pattern. And we're going to have to make ourselves like Yeshua. Train your children to be like Yeshua. Like Yeshua lived when he was here on this earth. The things he did, the things he taught. Train your children to be just like him, doing those things. You be like him, doing those things. Don't try to train your children one way and say, let's go see some unconverted kinfolks on the other thing. Or let's go to the Six Flags, to the Ferris wheels. Let's go waste some time and some money that could be used in the Word. Don't get your mind back on the world. This is what he says. 3 out of 4 will fall away because they're drawn back into this stupidity that the world is filled with at this time. In chapter 19 in verse 17, he says, "But he said unto him, Why do you question me about righteousness? There is one, only one, who is the standard and perfection of righteousness." That one is making us into his image, into his likeness. He drives out all others, as we'll see in just a moment. And that is Yahweh. So if you would enter into life, keep his laws. Keep Yahweh's laws. Look on down to verse 29. "And everyone who has forsaken houses," do you get that? Now, everyone who gives this stuff up, brothers, sisters, father or mother, children or lands. Here's a special promise of Yahshua, Messiah, to you. You better get it on your head. You know, he's your judge, as I just got through reading to you. He is your judge. For my name's sake, for my authority's sake, for my authority's sake, will receive 100-fold and will inherit everlasting life. You'll also be able to give your unconverted kin that you want to stay away from right now, totally stay away from right now, lest they make you unclean, put stupidity in your mind, more stupidity than the thought of going to see them even. I hope I don't have to lose any more sleep because of that. Praise Yahweh. Now I want you to go over to Hebrews. There's just a few more things that I've got to get in your mind closely. Let's go to Hebrews 4. Hebrews 3 first, because it leads up to this. We see Yahweh turned the trials. He put the people after. I'm getting ahead of myself, but I got to get this in your mind. After he was rejected, after they chose sin, which he knew they would choose sin because he made them subject to that, subject to vanity, subject to desiring things that they shouldn't desire, and of course he says deal with it, overcome it. You must overcome it. To be a part of my family, you've got to overcome these whims and desires. And then he gives you the peaceful solution in these last days to guide you and show you just how to become like Yahshua himself. If you will just practice it. If you don't practice it, you're not going to be there. And that's a simple fact, and you're wasting your time here with me right now. I won't gripe at you anymore. But I want to make it perfectly clear you can't do these things and stay in Yahweh's house. You just can't be a part of his kingdom. You're going to have to get your mind on his kingdom. His kingdom is so close you can. It's like the wind. You can just about feel it. Well, here he ran them out from the tree of life, from the house of Yahweh, and he even set a flaming sword to keep them out. Now that's what Genesis shows. Because they wouldn't do what he said. And they wanted to follow Cain, well, he said, go follow him. Go follow him, and here's what you're going to get in the last day. Missiles. Ballistic missiles. And he writes it in the clouds over the house of Yahweh. 2013. No one could do that but Yahweh. Try writing with the clouds. The Indians tried it, with their smoke signals. Why don't you try it? Try writing in these clouds, or any of you scientific-minded people out there listening to me. Try to write something in the clouds. You can't do it. You don't have that power. You could join the house of Yahweh and be given the power over the clouds, yes, and they'd do what you said very soon. But he says here in chapter 3 of Hebrews that he said this before, that he put the mankind on trial and said, now you're going to have to work and prove that you won't sin, and that you'll turn from all sin and you'll do my will totally. This is what the great Kohan Shaul brought out just a couple of days ago. If you didn't get that, you need to go back and listen to that sermon. While it is said today, if you would hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. How many got mad at me when I said that? You want to raise your hand and show me? I hope not. Praise Yahweh. Do not harden your hearts, as in the provocation. That means where they're actually provoked. That's what mankind is doing to one another right now. You want to step back into that world? He has just showed us, as I showed you from this picture right here, the number. The number of that picture right there actually means peace, joy, and love given to his house. That what we were dealing with, that Yahweh brought all this joy and gladness to us, this feast, was a marvelous thing. You know, we could have had men in here with guns shooting each other, women hitting each other over the heads, pulling your hairs out, taking telephones away from each other. You know, that's what they're doing in the world. But you live together peacefully. You know what a miracle that is? That's not done anywhere in the earth except the house of Yahweh. The days of provocation, that is, provoking to anger, and saying, you've got to overcome this, as he said to Cain. Well, he says here now in verse 16, for some, when they had heard, rebelled, but not all rebel now. Not all rebel, because we had a family that actually brought forth Yeshua out of all that mess, who came out of Egypt through Moshe, but with whom was he testing for 40 years? Was it not those who sinned, whose carcasses fell in the wilderness, and to whom did he vow that they would not enter his rest? Enter his rest? What is he speaking of there? Now, enter his rest. That they would not enter his rest, but to those who did not obey. That's the ones he vowed would never enter his rest. So we see that they could not enter in because of unbelief. Now, in Hebrews 4, therefore, since a promise of entering his rest remains, let us fear so that none of you should come short of it. For the message was preached unto us as well as to them, but the word which they heard did not benefit them, because they did not share in the faith of those who obeyed the message. However, we who have believed do enter that rest. That is, we're going to enter that rest. And he has said, so I vowed in my wrath, they will, that's a little bit wrong, but anyway, don't get your mind on that. They will not enter my rest, although the works were finished from the foundation of the earth. That is, they were prophesied to be finished. I want you to keep that in mind, entering his rest here now. And Yahweh promises rest, starting with keeping your appointments, of course. That's the first start of entering into the rest of Yahweh, this entering into the rest. There's two things shown in this. Entering into the rest starts with keeping your appointments with Yahweh, keeping the seventh-day Sabbath. If you turn over to 2 Chronicles here, this gives us a hint of what is spoken of here, and also what is given in Genesis that we will see later. 2 Chronicles 15. 2 Chronicles, found on page 363. 2 Chronicles 15. Now, this was after they'd been trained. The house of Yahweh was quite some size at that time. And of course, as we just read, not all rebelled against Yahweh, but many of them did. And of course, it was shown. They rose up against Moshe. They started changing the laws of Yahweh. They started leading others to rebel. And of course, this grew, and they made plans to take over the 12 tribes of Israel. They left Israel. This is 2 Chronicles now, not 2 Corinthians. 2 Chronicles 15 and verse 14. Verse 14. Well, they vowed an oath in front of Yahweh with a loud voice, with a shout of joy. Do you hear any of that going on here? Very joyous feast and much shouting, a shout of joy with trumpets and with ram's horns. All Yada rejoiced over the oath, for they had vowed it with all their heart and mind, and had sought him with all their being. So he was found by them, and Yahweh gave them peace. Now, the actual, that should have been translated rest. Yahweh gave them rest. If you'd circle that and route it out to the side, in fact, that's where you'll find it in Strong's, is under rest. And I don't know how that peace got there, but it does include peace. The word does include peace, but it's talking about the same rest that's in the Hebrews, the 4th chapter. He gave them peace or rest all around. Asa, the king, even removed his grandmother. Wow. But Yahweh, this is my grandmother. Not his, not hers. This is my grandmother. She's precious. She can destroy your life right now. She can destroy everything you've worked for. Grandmama can do that. She sure can. Children can do it if you let them. Unconverted children, unconverted kin, this is what it's speaking of. And he shows you an example here of how they got this rest, how they were able to actually enter into Yahweh's rest before time and actually live it here as an example on earth. And this took place for about 16 years. They lived in peace, in rest and joy for about 16 years straight here. Asa the king even removed his grandmother from being queen mother because she had made an obscene, disgusting image of Asherai, that's Ashtar, Astarta, that's Easter. She's celebrating Easter, the same thing that that Yeremiah condemned them for, and said, this is the reason you're suffering. You've cut yourselves off from Yahweh. You're not in his rest anymore. And you can't be as long as you keep this up. The sacred pole, which Asa cut down, mashed and burned in the Kidron Valley, verse 17, although he did not completely remove the high places from Israel, Asa's heart, mind was perfect towards Yahweh. He also brought into the house of Yahweh those things which his father had dedicated, and also those things which he himself had dedicated, silver, gold, and other articles. Then there was no war, no war. You see that? Peace, peace, rest. Gave them peace from the world. The world won't repent. The world is building rockets, and let's be turning over to second Yochanan. The world is building rockets and planes to kill each other, to destroy each other. Prophecy says they're going to. Turn over to page 969. The second Yochanan. The world is building the destructive weapons that started the rockets, the ballistic missiles. I think The great deacon brought that out, the date of that rocket. I was born in 1934. This rocket, the first one, was in 1932. Yahweh before that says knowledge will be increased. And this is what you're going to do with the knowledge that I've given you, the increase in knowledge. You're going to take this and build war weapons. What if you had the great authority that he has actually promised to his house, his family? You see, what if that was given to the world at this time? But they'd destroy the universe with it. All their minds is on is taking advantage of one another, not servitude. Remember, servitude, that's Yahweh's attitude in you. that was great. One of the ladies, as I was working and listening to the speeches yesterday, and one of the ladies, I think her name was Pearl Fesby, I believe is the way they pronounced it, but she said, you can't see you can't see this, but you can certainly see, they're talking about the peaceful solution, you can't see it, but you can certainly see the improvement, and you can see it active in your children once you start teaching them. Well, of course, when you start seeing this, then you know you're on the right track right there. And but if you don't ever teach it, of course, you won't see the results of it. Keep that in mind when Yahshua said almost the same thing. He said, you can't see the Spirit, but you can certainly see the results of it. She said, she quoted it. I don't know if she knew what she was saying there or not, but she certainly said almost the same thing as Yahshua said. You can't see the Spirit. You can't see character, can you? But you can see it displayed in a person's actions. Well, now, this message, he said, now, this message was taught in the beginning, he said. In the beginning. Well, there's only one beginning for mankind. But it's this message that I'm just bringing you just now. How to have peace and entering this peace and so forth. It was actually given in Genesis. Here in Yochanan, chapter 1, there's only one chapter, and verse 6, he said, and this is love, that we walk after his laws. Those are the laws that, as you have heard from the beginning, you should walk in them. I don't believe that. Surely you can't believe that. Let's go back to Genesis now. Genesis, the second chapter. The problem with the religions today, they don't believe the Scriptures. They don't believe anything. They say, well, all the Old Testament was done away with. That Jesus did away with it. No, they got that mixed up. It was Constantine that did away with it. He's the one that chose the god Jesus and Zeus and Christa and said, take this god. He didn't know it was two that he has given them, but he says, you'll worship this one god now. And he gave them two. It shows about, they said that Constantine was one of the historians said he is a complete idiot. He gave them this name, and they've really stuck with it, but it was under the threat of death that they started worshiping this, and of course the Catholic Church admits they took the name Yahshua out of the Scriptures and replaced it with these two gods that Constantine gave them. Now that's history, and the history is true. Now here in Genesis now, turn to chapter 2, and notice chapter 9. And out of the ground Yahweh made every tree grow that is pleasant to the sight, something you can really rejoice over. And this is what we saw at this feast. More rejoicing this time than the last feast, and I said the last feast was the best I'd ever seen. But there was more of this feast than ever. It's like Chronicles when they were shouting with joy, praise Yahweh. Pleasant to the sight and desirable for food, the tree of life. All of these things, desirable for food, pleasant to see, pleasant to live with, servitude, rejoicing as we serve one another. That's the tree of life, the tree of life. Well, now, what does that tell you? If you look back to verse 7, you'll see Abel's teaching. Back to verse 7. Get it now, everybody. Read it for yourself. You see the tree of life. Remember, Yeshua said he doesn't take his children from trees of thistle, trees of thorns. He said these are all false teachings, false religions. He said a righteous tree cannot produce that kind of fruit. Unrighteous tree can't produce this right here. They can't produce the pleasantness. No, they produce war. They don't produce the desirable, although they think this is desirable when they want to steal land, houses, money, people, molest children, seduce women, seduce men. They think this is desirable, but it bites back, and it weakens the mind. It ruins the mind. Their minds are so defiled right now. They think that dropping a bomb, killing families, killing children, that don't even know why they're fighting, babies. The doctor that they gave a life sentence, that man is not guilty for killing babies. They've told him over and over, this is right, this is okay. The Supreme Court said it's okay. Well, they finally admitted it was murder. That's one thing that they did, that they've been hiding all this time. But they can't produce peace. They can't produce rest. They can't produce anything joyable and endurable. Well, look back to verse 7 now, and you'll see Abel's teaching here. In the beginning, and Yahweh formed man out of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. Or the King James says a living soul, I believe. Well, what does that say there? What's he actually saying? You wouldn't know it from what the words is choosing. But anyway, let's just look at the word breath. The word breath. This is Abel's teaching, and the word breath that he breathed into his nostrils. You think of this as, spanking a baby and making him start crying when he's born. That's what's conjured up into your mind when you read this. The word actually means here, according to Strong's Concordance and every other intelligent dictionary that I've seen, it means divine inspiration. Divine inspiration. Then it means intellect. Well, what does intellect mean? It means teaching. It means learning. It means, well, what are you learning? You're learning here how to be peaceful and kind and loving. This is a love that Yahweh taught, desirable. And it also means, now get this word because it does mean this, spirit. Spirit. But you got to know what spirit means. It don't mean Casper the Friendly Ghost by any means. It doesn't mean a gassy god up there somewhere floating around that came down and supposedly committed fornication with Mary. These are all lies. Spirit. We'll see in just a moment. Well, what Abel was actually teaching here was this breath of life, eternal life, eternal life. And it was a teaching of how to live eternally. Well, if you'll look the verse 9 again, he says, the tree of life. That's what he was teaching, the tree of life to the people here, teaching knowledge to them. Yahweh planted a garden eastward, top, eastward, meaning first or before. So this garden was planted before mankind was created. This is what he's saying here. But before mankind was created, Yahweh planted a garden so he could feed them. He had it all planned out here. Well, this is what the Catholic Church and critics, there's critics on everything in the Scripture. And I've read most of it, I think. Of course, there's loopholes in every one of them that I read, and I'd think, no, surely no one would believe that. Surely they know the Scriptures better than that, but they don't. But critics say, the Catholic Church said this. I remember the Pope wrote a letter saying there's controversies in the beginning, in the creation chapter of Genesis. No, it's no controversies if you'll just believe what the Hebrew word actually says. Abel was the teacher, as is shown in chapter 4. By the time this took place right here, we had a pretty great population going. And of course, Abel had a flock following Yahweh. Cain had a flock following Easter goddesses and rabbits laying eggs and so forth. And they're saying, oh no, we're like the gods, When I die, I'm going to be a god and I'm going to float around in heaven on a cloud. Well, that's the same thing they're teaching today, if you notice. So he planted a garden before. Yahweh planted a garden eastward. The word there means actually before, aforetime, or afore, ever or everlasting. We have examples of that, but that should be enough to get you to know that what has actually took place. And of course, Abel went on to teach, out of the ground Yahweh made every tree, out of the ground. This means he taught about microorganisms. Out of the ground. This was a teaching of Abel. How did it get here? And then he taught mankind. We see this teaching throughout the Holy Scriptures, and I remember several sermons that I brought to you showing the creeping things that creep on earth. There was science is finding out about a little of this right now. If I can discover that article. Here it is. Now, mankind is getting close to this. Mainly because we brought it out several years ago and they're checking into it. If you remember, I told you that the trees, the county extension agent gave the great Kohan Benjamin this information, that when a tree is not getting the proper food from the soil, it sends out a message. And that message is heard by other creeping things, which comes in and starts destroying what is, destroying what is bringing the tree further down. It destroys that, including the fruit that's on it, so the tree can actually survive and maybe get its health back. Now here's a new one that just came out. Plants talk to each other using underground fungus network. Now, if you think about what goes on in your body and brain, your body is made up of trillions of micro kingdoms. And I brought this out to you months and months ago, maybe years ago. But it's made up of trillions of micro kingdoms inside your body. It has to do with your seeing. There's several kingdoms in your eyeballs here that send messages to your brain and actually send images to your brain. Well, the same thing is taking place here, that they have found that they are communicating with each other, that is, the plants that you see growing out of the ground. This was taught in the beginning by Abel. Abel taught for quite some length of time. You wouldn't know it by the way Genesis is written, Genesis chapter 1, 2, and 3, 4. But if you combined, as we did before, if you'll just remember, go back and get the tapes, I showed you throughout the Holy Scriptures where Yahweh added to this in both book 1 and book 2, and showed us what Abel actually taught, and that Abel was righteous, as Yeshua actually testified, which means he kept the laws of Yahweh. Righteousness is practicing the laws of Yahweh. He brought an offering of people to Yahweh that was actually suitable to enter into Yahweh's rest. Before the flaming sword, or after the flaming sword was put there, he actually brought these people, and then from his work, thousands of years later, they were still asking at Abel from the work that he had done. And he was teaching this very thing. You'd never know it unless you follow through and see all of his work by the prophets and the apostles. He says here, if you think it's weird that plants can talk to one another, here's something even weirder. One way they talk to one another is via a network of underground fungus. Isn't that beautiful? It's like they have cell phones and they communicate with each other. Many plants have chemical aroma that they deploy when aphids attack with chemicals that both repel the aphid and attract parasites, wasps, and so forth that are aphids, natural predators. So they call in a team to destroy them. It says those unconnected by the network appear not to receive the signal of attack and showed no chemical response. So if the telephone line doesn't reach them, if they don't have a cell phone, then they don't get the message. Somewhat the same. But they're getting close to what we will see here. Not today. I'm already way over time. But anyway, the breath now. It's a divine inspiration. That's a few sermons in itself. But Dave and I are trying to get some answers ourselves because there's some of the things that tie in with this that I don't understand yet. In Genesis 3 and verse 22 now. Genesis 3 and verse 22. Now, Genesis 3 is where Satan talks Eve into sin. And that's the first 7 verses, and it shows that she sinned, and they put it naked. They knew that they were naked. Well, the Hebrew word there showed that word actually means sin in verse 7. But 3 through 7 shows that she talked him into wanting to be like the gods and follow a practice of sin. So, in verse 22 now, 3 and verse 22, he says, Then Yahweh said, Behold, the man now has become like one who has begun to know righteousness and evil. And now he must not be allowed to put out his hand and also take of the tree of life and eat and live forever. Therefore Yahweh sent him out of the garden. This word here, according to Strong's Exhaustive Concordance, the word garden means garden or protected place. Out of the house of Yahweh, the protected place. Protected place. Now verse 24. So he drove out man, and he placed cherubim at the east of the Garden of Eden, and a flaming sword. Here's more sermons, but just take it for what it says right now. Flaming sword which turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life. So Yahweh put man on trial and said, now you've got to prove yourself to me before you'll ever get into my kingdom or ever enter my rest. His rest being, of course, if you I'll jump ahead just a little bit, Isaiah 2:2, which shows, in the last days I will establish my house. It will bring perfect peace to the earth. There won't be any stopping it. It's going to bring perfect peace. Praise Yahweh. And then a kingdom is going to be set up that will guard and keep. That will guard and keep. That was the message that he told Adam. He set him in the garden to guard and keep this. Don't let it change. Well, Adam he wasn't deceived, but he was tempted into going to see Grandmama, going to see Aunt Josephine, whoever it was he was going to see. And of course, he fell into sin. Whatever sin it was, sin is sin. He should have kept his mind on the garden, guarding and keeping it, instead of going and visiting kinfolks. You need to do this, brethren. You need to buckle down and get to studying every minute you possibly can. Either study the books of Yisrayl, the book of Yahweh, listen to the sermons. In fact, you can listen to the sermons now in one ear if you can train yourself to do that and read. You know, you can do two things at once. You can study both ways here. You can listen to the sermons on the one hand and read on the other. Don't waste your time. Keep building your mind. It's going to be worth it here in just a few days now. You're going to see all of this break loose, and we're going to receive this great gift if you're ready. If you're not ready, you're going to get left out. May Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services back to the next leader. I love you!
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. One quick announcement. Starting 30 minutes after services, Abel's Kitchen will be serving doubles. One per person until all are served. Pizza slices only will be available after all the doubles have been served. And that's all the announcements. We'll go ahead and turn it over to the priest for closing prayer.
Let's raise our hands to Father Yahweh. Great and merciful Father Yahweh, this is a servant in your house, Kwan Kananya, asking to come before you with your people, Father Yahweh, here on this Sabbath day, asking to approach your throne in unity with and through the body of priests, being seat of the witness, Yisrayl Hawkins, and through our high priest and Savior, Yeshua Messiah. Father Yahweh, we do thank you for this great message, Father Yahweh, from our overseer that was given many years ago, but still applies to this very day, Father Yahweh, the breath of life that is being poured out onto your people, Father Yahweh, at the house of Yahweh, teaching us how we can live forever, the great laws, the prophets, and the peaceful solution, Father Yahweh, which will make us in your image and likeness and qualify us, Father Yahweh, to enter in through the gates into this great kingdom because of the righteousness that we practice. We do trust in your word, Father Yahweh. We do trust in the teachings of the one sent who followed your word, Father Yahweh, and who was led and guided by our high priest, Yeshua Messiah, who is still leading and guiding this house in these last days, Father Yahweh. I do pray that you will help us to believe without seeing and inspire us every day, Father Yahweh, in the work that we must continue in doing, and help us, Father Yahweh, to be in unity with your every word, Father Yahweh, and show this true love, Father Yahweh, not only towards you, but towards our neighbors as we work and and interact with our brothers and sisters on a daily basis. We ask your blessings upon the food and the drink, Father Yahweh, and blessing of the work that will go on this afternoon, Father Yahweh, and serving one another. And we do, Father Yahweh, look forward to rejoicing throughout all eternity, Father, as we enter into this rest every weekly Sabbath day, Father Yahweh, and also on the feast days, during the feast days. We do ask these things of you and bless you and pray your blessings upon your people, the health of your people, and the work of this house, Father. And we ask these things through our high priest and Savior, Yeshua Messiah, being seat of the witness Israel Hawkins, into the body of priests. Hallelujah. Yahweh.